We are starting with Revelation Part 3, Lesson 2, which this part of Revelation, as we go through it, is talking about the what is the sign of His coming, and of the end of the age. So we have done our work on Part 1, which was primarily looking at the messages to the churches. Part 2 was really just staying in the book of Revelation alone, which we're still doing in these first lessons. It's just seeing what Revelation said and setting a really good timeline or a plumb line for what Revelation said, because parts 3 that we're in now and parts 4 are going to start filling in some of the gaps or making us understand better, because then we're going to go outside of Revelation. Even though in these first few weeks we haven't done, or first couple of weeks we're not going to do that, because we're still looking and laying out. One of the reasons for these overview lessons in a course where all of you that are here have actually done parts 1 and part 2 is because if this was a standalone course, a new person coming in couldn't possibly know some of the things that we had to look at, because it was a pretty good lesson, pretty long lesson this week, a lot of writing. Great review for us, but it would be a first time through maybe for someone if they were coming into part 3 and this being standalone. But as a result, it's a great review for us. So we are going to look today at Revelation chapters 11 through 14. That's what we confined ourselves to this week. And as a result of what we're going to discuss, as a result of what you study, hopefully we're going to put some things on a timeline and be able to nail some events down and see how they line up. Now, so just as by way of getting our minds into Revelation, who wrote down the book of Revelation? John. John being the beloved disciple of Jesus, John the one who leaned against Jesus' breast, very close. The inner circle, Paul, James, and John, were part of Jesus' closest and most inner circle. John's the one that stood at the foot of the cross, and Jesus said, "Behold your mother," talking about his mother, but "Mother, behold your son," meaning he kind of passed on the care of Mary to John. That's how much he trusted him. That's how close he was. So John, amazing John. Now at the point when John's writing this down, or when this revelation comes to him, where is he? On the Isle of Patmos.
In exile.
In exile, not a vacation. This is a really bad place. He is a prisoner on the Isle of Patmos. Historically, we have been told that there's some horrible things that might have happened to him, torturous things that he has endured. He's also not a young man at this point. We believe Revelation was written about when? About 95 AD, with Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection being around 32, 33 AD. So we're talking about 60-something years from that time. John would be elderly. He'd be close to 90 possibly. So, because we don't know exactly how old he was when he was walking with Jesus in Jesus' ministry here on earth. So that's part of the historic context, and to understand when. It's important we're not going to die on the hill of 95 AD, but there's reason to believe it's about that time. And as you reason that, you realize, for instance, that if it was 95 AD, then that's, I know it sounds obvious, but after 70 AD, which is significant because Jerusalem was attacked and destroyed in 70 AD by General Titus. And therefore, these events are after that. That means there's no temple at the time that John is writing this, no temple that's still standing. Remember, Jesus said, and we will see that in a future lesson, that he said, "No stone will be left unturned." So that had happened. John would know about that, and now we're at least about 25 years later. Lots of time has passed. Lots of other people have died. Every one of the disciples but John has been martyred by this point. He's the only one that wasn't. So, and not all of that information do we get from the Bible. Like what happened to Peter isn't recorded to us and preserved in these 66 books. Some of it we have to know from historic documents elsewhere, and it fits. And it also tells us of those times. So, as we plunge into the book of Revelation, in Revelation 1:19, we're told why John was told to write down this book. What was he told to write? Things that he had seen, the things which are, and the things which shall take place after these things. Okay, so as we can use that as a segment division for the book, where do the chapters fall? If you're looking at the things which he had seen, what chapter? Chapter 1. The things which are 2 and 3, and the things which will take place after these things starts 4 and continues through 22. So that's where we are. The things which were the messages to the churches, real churches of those times, and lots that we can learn relevant to today. And certainly not something that we need to disregard. We're also told that if we study this book, and if we read it, no, I didn't say study, if we read, hear, and heed it, which would be part of kind of the study, then, and the action and the application, then we will be what? What will be the result of read, hearing, and heeding this book? Blessed, right? We're also told if we take anything away from it or add anything to it, we will be cursed. We will get all the plagues that are in this book. Now, whether or not we can apply that to the whole other 65 books of the Bible, I think we can. But it's certainly said of this one. So we need to take care. That's why handling this accurately is vitally important. That's why you'll a lot of times have me definitely hesitate from drawing a conclusion about something if I can't absolutely draw a conclusion about it. So, but God gave it to us for a reason. And some of why we can't understand everything is because we're not going to know until it happens, until we're seeing those events take place. But we can know about the event. We just don't know how it's going to happen, possibly. All right? But is this a book of just imagery and allegory and spirituality? No. This is a book that we need to take literally. And yes, we need to take it very seriously. But where there are images, it says, you know, like or as. It uses simile, it gives words that help us to understand that at that point it's just helping us to understand it, but it's not necessarily like the moon. If it says the moon is going to be like blood, it's not saying the moon is blood until it says the moon becomes blood. Then it is saying it becomes blood. Don't understand it? Just telling you that's what it is. Just a little bit of an aside, does anybody know what Sunday is? Sunday, for the camera, September 13th, 2015. I'm back in the 1900s. 2015.
It's a Jewish holiday.
It's a Jewish feast or festival. Right. What comes about this time of year in the Jewish religious calendar? Do you know? Feast of Tabernacles or Booths. Okay? Tabernacling meaning dwelling. Okay, so it's the feast of, well, for instance, in John 1 it says, and he came and he dwelt among us. That word is tabernacled among us. That's the idea of dwelling among us. But it's the picture of when they lived in their tents for 40 years in the wilderness. And they were to celebrate that, or be reminded. You're not going to celebrate, you know, wandering for 40 years. But being in those booths and in a very transient state needed to be a reminder, and so they had this festival set aside in their religious calendar, but it also, timing-wise, begins in their months. This time, September 13th, begins their civil calendar. There's a religious calendar and there's a civil calendar. The religious calendar starts in the month that is the 15th of that month is when Passover occurs. That's the first month of their religious calendar, but this starts their civil calendar. There's another historic interest to this particular end of this civil year. The beginning of a new civil year is that it's the end of a what they call Shemitah year, or a Sabbath. Remember the 7th year they were supposed to give the land a rest? Well, this is the end of one of those Sabbath years, a Shemitah year. And every 7 of those, so 49 years, was the year that started what they called Jubilee. This is the end of a 49th year. And the 4th blood moon in the tetrad that has occurred. And this is the first time, or I think the only time, I'm not sure about that, or the first time in a long time, where the tetrad of 4 blood moons has happened, and every one of them fell on a Jewish calendar festival or feast. So we've had Feast of Tabernacles, started with Passover, Feast of Tabernacles, Passover, and now Feast of Tabernacles. And we will see this a little bit further, I'm a little bit preempting, but if you look at the feast of the Jewish calendar, Passover being one, and waving of the bread and all of that stuff. Every one of those has been fulfilled by Christ, except the Feast of Tabernacles. And it's the one feast and festival that's talked about in the millennial time. Interesting, isn't it? Unfortunately, though, if you look at recent history of every one of these seventh year endings, these Shemitah year endings, there has been an economic downturn in America. The Great Depression, for instance, fell at the end of Shemitah year.
87.
In
87.
1987?
Oh.
Okay. And then 7 years ago is when we had the downturn in the economy here in America. And they called it a recession. They called it different things. It wasn't a depression, but a recession. So, do we go and cover our heads and cower? No. We look up, because our redemption is nigh. I really don't, I'm not sitting here telling you Sundays we're all going to go flying through the sky. I can't tell you that. You can hope that. I can't tell you that. But I can tell you that be prepared, because we might experience a lot of bad in America before we leave this earth, before Jesus' return. We might see a lot of bad. So be prepared. Starting next week, there could be a downturn. Or it could be within a few days or sometime after. It doesn't happen necessarily on the day. But also watch for the blood moon.
Yes.
Yeah. The last one, actually, we really couldn't see from here because it really only like out west. It's like kind of where you were geographically. They got to see it better than we did, but I saw some pictures of it. It's really cool. And it's actually a solar eclipse. That's what causes the moon to look like blood, or what we call blood moon. So, now, let's look at chapters 11 through 14 of Revelation. We looked at chapter 11 last week. We want to look, it's great to look at the details, and I hope y'all wrote them all down, but we're really going to look at events, progression of events, and especially look for time phrases. So, in chapter 11, we saw last week, this is one of the chapters that talks about what I call characters. Sorry, I just walked out of my shoe. The characters, or I hate to use the word characters, personages. Chapter 10 showed us what? There was John talking to a strong angel. Remember, the strong angel had a book, and John read the book. So that was one of the chapters that started introducing some personages. Chapter 11 first starts out with John doing what? John measures the temple, right? And he doesn't measure something. What does he not measure? The court. Okay, why?
Hey,
Yes.
if you want to see the whole board, we need to change the camera. You only
Okay.
got half the board.
Oh, it's not on the board?
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for,
Okay, so why was he told not to measure the court? It was going to be trampled underfoot, right?
For 3.5 years.
it shows now,
Or
doesn't
what was the time period given?
it? Or even
160 days.
Actually, it was given 42 months.
42 months.
Okay,
I was ahead of myself.
that's okay. It's always good to see these time phrases though. For 42 months, the court is going to be trampled underfoot by the nations. It was given to the nations to trample underfoot for 42 months. And so he was told not to. Now he was also told not to just measure the temple, but to measure the people, or the altar, and those who worship in it. I don't know how you measure that, but except for maybe to count or no. But it's not just significant that it's a building. There's an altar, which also tells us something. There's an altar, what's going on? Worship. What kind? There's worship going on, but at the temple, if there's a temple and there's an altar, sacrifices, animal sacrifices are going to be going on that altar. Okay. Now, and the outer court is going to be left out. Then we have some more personages talked about, and who is that?
Two
The two witnesses, and I'm just going to say 2W because that's how I indicate them quickly. The two witnesses. Tell me quickly a little bit about these two witnesses. How do we identify them?
They're in sackcloth.
There's sackcloth, I'm dressed in sackcloth, and
Be preaching.
they're going to be testifying, preaching. Prophesying, those are words that are used, prophesying and
For
testimony.
3.5 years.
For how long?
3.5.
What's Keldus?
1,260
days. Okay, so they have 1,260 days. And that's how long they're going to prophesy or testify, whichever, phrase that, because I think both are told. They're in sackcloth. Whose witnesses are they? God's witnesses. We don't want to forget, these are not just people that come on the scene on their own, and there's some bad guys in Revelation, so we've got to make sure we get our teams right. There are some things that they're able to do. What are they able to do?
They can harm them, fire flows from their mouth.
Fire comes out of their mouth if anybody comes and tries to harm them.
Right.
Pretty powerful stuff. They're able to do what about rain?
Okay.
Shut up the sky so that it does not rain during the days of their testimony. So that could be for a full 1,260 days, there's no rain.
Turn water into blood.
Turn water into blood. I've heard that before, that's happened before, and God has done that before. But all of these things, if you were to witness those things, would it get your attention?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it gets your attention. Is it going to get the attention of believers, but would it get the attention of the world? Yes and no. They're going to notice it. They're going to be affected by it because
Hearts are hardened.
nobody would see the fire proceeding out of their mouth unless somebody does come to harm them. So somebody's coming against them at some point, even if it's just one person to do it. Okay, but at the end of this 1,260 days, what happens? How? Who? Who and how?
Beast.
Beast. Okay, so there's a beast. Where does he come from?
Abyss.
Beast from the abyss kills them. Now, kills them, let's just review. What has happened to anyone who's tried to harm them up to now?
They got killed.
Fire came out of their mouth and they were killed, right? So now the beast comes up. So again, when we're talking about are these things going to be noticed? These two witnesses have 3.5 years to do all of this. Everybody's going to have known this and noticed this. Anybody that's come against them to stop them has been killed, and suddenly they're killed by a person, by a beast, as it says. So we're going to call it beast, who comes out of the abyss. And we're going to figure out that whole beast abyss thing in a little bit. Have we ever heard of a beast yet in Revelation? Prior to chapter 11. Because we have, since we've done our study. Now, where do we hear about any beast? You saw it this week in chapter, remember bad Friday 13th, remember chapter 13, okay? It's the easy way to remember. Beast is from chapter 13, it's where we hear a lot about it. Then their bodies lie in the streets somewhere, where in Jerusalem, and we know that because it says where their Lord was crucified, and they are God's servants. So where their Lord was crucified, or where their Lord, it says was crucified, I was right about that. Okay, so we know the city they're talking about is Jerusalem. They're killed there, and their bodies lie in the street for how long?
3.5 days.
In an interesting 3.5 years and 3.5 days. Okay, and it's always when God does that. So, so their bodies lie for 3.5 days in Jerusalem. What's going on in that time?
People were celebrating.
People are celebrating. They're giving gifts to each other. They're excited. And why? Because this shows us who noticed and were they noticed. Why were they celebrating? Because these two are dead.
Right.
Because they had been impacted by these two for that 3.5 years, and no one could do anything to them.
They couldn't even bury them in a tomb once they were dead.
Well, it wasn't couldn't.
Wouldn't.
Wouldn't. They prevented their bodies
Right.
from being buried for 3.5 days. They wanted them on display, it sounds.
Right.
It looks like. Okay, so they're celebrating. And these are the people who live on the earth. I call them earth dwellers. And where we see more and more about earth dwellers throughout the book of Revelation. It is a phrase you want to mark. Then what happens after the 3.5 days?
God puts
Puts
life into them.
Okay, breath of life. And then what?
Being saved into heaven.
They're called to heaven.
And cloud.
and they go in a cloud. Okay? When this happens, who sees it?
Their enemies.
Their enemies.
Everybody.
All these people that have been celebrating for 3.5 days, all these people that have been tormented by them for 3.5 years, watch this happen. Okay? Worldwide, the only way that could happen is in the time frame we live. It has not been from before like the 80s or 90s that there could be an event happening that the entire world actually saw as it happened. We're in that time. We've been in that time for a little while, but we're in that time for the first time in the history of human being. So the whole world can watch this. Their enemies behold them, certainly those that are standing there in Jerusalem, right? Now what happens when they go to heaven? What it says, in that hour, what happens?
Earthquake.
Right, so there's an earthquake.
Tenth of the city falls.
There's an earthquake, that's a big earthquake. 10th of the city falls
7,000 people die.
and 7,000 are killed.
Everybody else is scared.
And the rest give glory, right?
That's right. No, there's some of them are scared.
The rest give glory to God. And yeah, some are afraid, definitely, or people are going to be afraid. Right. Now there is, after this, there is a statement made. Though it's in that hour. Then it says, what is past?
Second woe.
Second woe. So we have the end of the second woe. The third one is coming quickly, it says.
Yes.
And then what happens after? After that phrase, what does it say?
So seventh angel sound.
Okay, so you've got the seventh angel, and I'm gonna put / trumpet, sounds. So when we are looking at these events that we see in chapter 11, those all occur in the sixth trumpet. No, well, these events of the two witnesses dying happen at the end of the sixth trumpet. How far back the start of their testimony goes would probably extend beyond the sixth trumpet. But when they die, when they're in the streets, when the earthquake happens, that's the end of the sixth trumpet. And then the seventh trumpet starts. Okay, yes, Sandy?
Well, I'm just kind of confused about these people that are giving glory to God. I thought they were all just hating God and celebrating because these two people are dead.
Okay, that's a good question. So who would they be? If everyone, does it say everyone is celebrating their death? It's saying those who dwell on the earth are celebrating their death. And remember, of course, when you just read that on a surface level, then you think, if that's the only time you ever read that, you're thinking everyone who's alive and living on the earth at the time. But later, and we'll see this when we get to chapter 13, they're specifically defined. Earth dwellers, as I call them, those who dwell on the earth, are defined as those whose names are not written, right? So these are unbelievers, okay? So would there possibly be in that same city believers?
Yes.
Okay, and what city are we talking about?
Jerusalem.
So what nationality might they be? Jewish, right. Okay, there could be Gentiles. Definitely, don't get me wrong. There could be Gentiles there. So maybe some of the rest gave glory are the believers that are there. Or it could just be they gave credit to, in a sense. You know, Kay talked about glory last week being a true estimate or a true description of who God is, right? I've often said, and tried to illustrate it because I remember this lesson in Kay's message last week. I remember it back when I heard it in the 90s when she first was recording this and I first went through Revelation. And I just had at the same time had this, because my kids were young, Bill Nye the Science Guy lesson. And trust me, Bill Nye the Science Guy is not somebody to go to for spiritual consultation. But he did a great job explaining light in this one TV program that Corbin or Matt were listening to. And in it, he talks about the fracturing of light. You know, we've all had the crystal that, you know, gives the rainbow effect, or we all know that a drop of water when the sun hits it causes the rainbow, right? I mean, we know that God made that happen, but that's the science behind it, true Christian viewpoint science behind it. So if you look at light, you see that when you look at light as a whole, like all colors put together of light is white. the absence of any color part in the spectrum, the absence of all of it is black. Okay? Now, if you're talking pigments and paint, that doesn't work. Because if I were to squirt tubes of acrylic paint in all colors out, it's going to be a blob and a mass of nasty muddy brown or black, right? So we're not talking pigment. We're talking about color. Okay? And color comes from light. So even right now, as we look around this room, or if you look at my shirt versus anything else, what your eye perceives, the way God made it, is that it will reflect back the colors that this shirt represents in its individual parts, and it absorbs the other colors that it does not. So when, no, that's not, wait, I think I've got that opposite. Anyway, that's how your eye perceives the colors because of the absorption versus reflection. So if you see white, if you see this white piece of paper, what's happened is all of the parts of light have hit this and reflected back. So you see white, so it's the reflection of what's actually there. If you saw black, it absorbs all of the color and does not reflect anything back. That's why you don't wear black and stand in the sun and you get really, really hot. Whereas if you wear white, the hope is it's going to reflect some of the heat. Okay, so that's what it has to do, and light has heat value. Okay, so when I heard that Bill Nye the Science Guy light session, and then I hear that message from Kay about glory, I'm thinking that's what we do or don't do. We either receive all of the light reflected from God and don't reflect any of it back, and we're black. We don't reflect anything back. But if we really receive everything from God and reflect it back truly, it's white. It's all of the colors. It's the glory of God. But I can absorb in the sense of taking credit for myself and act like I've done what it has been done if it is from God. Or I can just have a black soul and nothing is going to bounce back and you're going to see nothing. But if someone is to see truly the glory of God, if I'm giving God a correct estimation, giving others a correct estimation of who God is, they're going to see white. And it's going to be none of me. It's going to be all God they see. So it's not putting a mirror up to your face and seeing clearly. It's turning that mirror around, and when God shines in it, God shines out of it. So the world doesn't see me at all. The world sees God completely. That's giving God glory. So thanks to Bill Nye the Science Guy, I understood a little bit about light. Of course, I got a little bit wrong for you, so just erase what I got wrong and figure out what I meant. The absorption and all that stuff, sometimes I get that a little bit wrong. But, I didn't know that about our eyes. I didn't know all that about light until I heard that message. And again, even somebody who isn't of God can get things right because they understand God's truth, even if they don't acknowledge God. That's, again, they may, in this time and in this moment, have given God glory. In other words, saying, this is from God. Because these two witnesses have spent 3.5 years proclaiming God's message. They die, looks like, similarly, please don't hear me say exactly, similar to Christ's death. It looked like our side had been defeated. It looked like our head guy had been defeated. But really, the greatest defeat happened as a result, and that wasn't against Jesus. That was the death blow to Satan that happened at the moment that it looked like our darkest time. And then, what burst forth 3 days later? Up from the grave he arose. And he came out of that tomb, and he's alive forevermore. In this case, they're not Jesus, don't get me wrong, but they are the representatives of God in that time, giving a true message with great and mighty power. They may have roamed the land, but they certainly were in Jerusalem, and people may have come to them. And nothing could touch them until God allowed something to touch them and look like they were defeated. And basically, everybody aligned themselves with this, in a sense, because look what this beast has been able to do. they're rejoicing because they didn't like these two. They didn't like what had happened as a result. 3.5 days, they're rejoicing, and then all of a sudden, you got to know, their mouths were shut or dropped open as they watched them rise. 1/10 of the city fell, 7,000 were killed, and the rest gave glory. They were terrified and they gave glory to God. A lot of people over the course, well, when you think about Pharaoh in Egypt, every time one of those plagues happened, he caved and he told, all right, Moses, but as soon as the plague was taken away, his heart hardened and he said no, and he kept refusing. And we look at that and go, how in the world? Yeah, how in the world? But he did. And that's the kind of attitude we're seeing in the book of Revelation as it progresses. So at the point of the 7th trumpet sounding, we see in verse 15 a statement being made. And what is that statement?
The kingdom of God, the kingdom of the world became the kingdom of God.
Yes. So at this point we see this phrase, the kingdom of this world has become the kingdom of our Lord and His Christ, right?
Yes.
And He or they have begun to reign. He has begun to reign. This is hugely significant. When does this phrase happen? The 7th trumpet. Okay? Now I'm going to take you back for just a second. We didn't cover chapter 10 this week, but we marked it. In chapter 10, verse 7, what statement is made that's connected to the 7th trumpet?
The mystery of God is finished.
It says, in the days of the voice of the 7th angel, that's the 7th trumpet, when he is about to sound, then the mystery of God is finished. Okay, so I'm going to put it up here because we need to hang on to that one too. Time phrases, and these are time phrases even if an amount of time is not given. It's a phrase tied to a time, okay? So that's from chapter 10, verse 7. It's always good to give our references. And do cross-referencing in your Bible. Okay? And we'll get to that. And then there's other statements made by the 24 elders, fall on their face, and they give thanks to God. And then it says there's several statements. Nations were enraged. Your wrath came. The time came for the dead to be judged. Time to give their reward to your bondservants, the prophets, and to the saints, and to those who fear your name, the small and the great. And time came, if you want to go back to that, to give the reward to those who destroy the earth. It's not going to be a prize on that case, but they're going to be judged. And then we see the temple of God in heaven opened, and what appears? The Ark of the Covenant, right? So the Ark of the Covenant appears. There's flashes of lightning, sounds of thunder, an earthquake, and a great hailstorm. And this is a different earthquake than the one you just saw, okay?
You know, Peggy,
Yeah.
a little bit of a rabbit track. People are always looking for the Ark of the Covenant now. I believe it's not anywhere on earth.
It's certainly not going to be where they're going to find it. We know at this point where it is, right?
Yeah.
And it might be there right now, yeah, but it's not going to, because partly they would worship it. Now, it might be preserved until a time when this other temple is made, and then they'll put it back in there. But there's still going to be a time when it's in heaven. Okay. But yes, we know at this point, but I agree with you. I always think of that. People are looking all over the place for it, trying to find evidence of it. Okay, in chapter 12, we can divide chapter 12 into verses 1 to 6 and then 7 to 17. But we're going to look at what is going on in chapter 12. There are two things that, again, we're looking at kind of the chapters on personages. The two different things, but they point to something. What are they? Chapter 12.
A woman.
There's two signs. Two signs where?
In
Heaven. Remember, if you see a sign, it's not the substance. It's
Right.
pointing to something.
Right.
But then that sign seems to then turn into actual things. Okay, so the first sign is what?
A woman clothed with the sun.
So you've got the first sign is a woman. And then there's the description. She's clothed with the sun and what else?
Moon under her feet.
She's got the moon under her feet, and on her head are a crown of 12 stars. And then what else do we know about her? She's with child and she's in labor. Okay, so that's the sign. And we've looked in past lessons, we'll look again at this more clearly to understand who this woman is. But in the immediate, especially when you go into other verses, she gives birth to a child, and that child is a male child. That child is to rule the nations with a rod of iron, but he's caught up to heaven. So who do we know this child to be?
Christ.
Jesus. This is Jesus, yes, the Christ. So the immediate answer to who this woman is might be Mary, but it's not Mary because this spans too long a period of time. And so we know it's Israel. And the imagery that's shown of her, or the description of her, fits, for instance, and harkens your mind back to a dream that was had back in the book of Genesis. And who had that dream? The two dreams, actually. Joseph. Remember? Joseph talking about the brothers bowing down to him, but the sun, the moon and the sun also. And his father even gets upset and says in that second dream, so even your mother and I are going to bow down to you. So this is pointing to the 12 stars being the nation of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, so the 12 tribes of Israel are the woman that give birth to the child. Specifically, Mary gave birth to Jesus, but this is spanning a period of when Israel was started by God through Abraham and succeeding down to Isaac and Jacob, and then the covenant that was made with all of them. Then we've got time passing, because that was back a long time ago in Genesis, and then Jesus' birth is in Matthew. So much time has passed, but you have the nation of Israel giving birth to this male child who is going to rule the nations with a rod of iron and is caught up to God, and then and his throne. But then you have this woman doing what? After that statement, in verse 6, what does she do?
Well, she
fled
flees
to
to
the
the
wilderness.
wilderness.
So she gives birth, and the dragon wants to devour, and she flees to the wilderness. For how long? How long?
3.5 years.
1,260 days.
Okay, so 1,260 days. Okay, we see it in that verse as 1,260 days. After that's talked about, starting in verse 7, we have some other events. Now, we can go back a little bit, sorry, before we move out of this. You see in verse 4, well, back up to verse 3, we have another sign. I'm sorry, I forgot about our other sign. What is this sign?
Great red dragon.
The great red dragon. Okay. And it gives a description of him. He has 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 diadems on the heads. But he also does what with his tail?
Sweeps away the dirt and stars, throws them to earth.
Throws him to earth. And he stands over the woman, watching for this baby to be born because he wants to devour the child. What historic event do we know that to be? What happened in time? When Jesus was born,
Well, Herod had all the
yes,
male babies.
Herod had all the maybe. That's an immediate understanding of that. Now it's just also an attitude. He wanted to destroy. He spent Jesus' entire life and certainly his ministry trying to destroy him, and it looks like he succeeded and the crucifixion, but it didn't. But he stands over the woman, trying, waiting for the birth because he's going to devour the child. And then it shows after the child caught up to God, she flees to the wilderness. It doesn't say that's when it happens, just said that that's the next statement. Then you've got, we know who this dragon is based on these verses. Who is this dragon?
Satan.
Okay, lots of descriptions. Satan, what else? Serpent of old,
Devil.
the devil, the deceiver, right?
Deceives the whole world.
And accuser, right? Accuser of who? Accuser of the brethren? Isn't that what it says? I'm not making that up, right? Accuser of our brethren. Accuses them when and how? You know how long? Day and night before the throne of God. That's his role. If you want to understand who Satan is, this is some of the most compact information about him right here. There's other places we can see and will. But this is the place that tells us who was in the garden in Genesis chapter 3, not Genesis chapter 3. Genesis chapter 3 talks about a serpent in the garden, never names him as Satan or the devil. We've all grown up, we've all been told this. It wasn't incorrect information, but that information is the book of Revelation, not in the book of Genesis, the beginning and end. But it's how Scripture interprets Scripture. Again, we didn't make that up. It's there. It's just we have to point back to that. So that's the serpent of old, who's called the devil and Satan. All of these are accurate titles. He deceives the whole world. But that's who this great red dragon is. That's the sign. But then you've got the dragon, and we've got some things that he has done. But what is the event that's talked about in verse 7? There's a war in heaven. This war is, what are the two sides?
Michael and his angels, and the serpent and his angels. Dragon.
Right.
The dragon and his angels.
Okay, what is the result?
Dragon gets kicked out.
Dragon is kicked out. Dragon and his angels. Where are they cast?
Earth.
To earth. Okay. There was no place found for them in heaven any longer. So what does that tell you was their location? Heaven. They had access to heaven, but there's no place found for them any longer at this point. Okay? So they're cast to the earth, right? And what happens? What are the statements about, okay, what's going to happen in heaven because he's cast out? They're told to rejoice.
Yeah.
But then there's a warning to earth because he's coming there. And what is the warning? Woe. Woe to earth before he has been cast down, and he has what? Short time, and he's filled with great wrath. Okay? So when he's cast down, it's rejoice heaven, understandably. Woe earth. He has a short time and great wrath. Okay. He's not omniscient, but he can have read this. And he's trying all the time because he doesn't believe God. Remember in the garden, what did he say to Eve? Did he really say? But if he told you that, what was God, he's saying this. If he really told you not to eat that tree, did he really tell you not to eat that tree? And really, what is his goal? What is God's goal here? His goal is to keep you from being like him. Right? That's part of the deception. That's part of the lies that he will tell. But also, if you look in other places in Scripture and get a glimpse into who he is, he wanted to be equal to God. He wanted to raise his throne up to be equal to God. The I ams of Satan. I am this. I will do this. I will do this. Okay? So that's the one who at this point wars against the warrior God sends, Michael. Michael didn't start this fight. Now it says Michael and his angels wage war, and it says the dragon and his angels wage war. They're both coming at this offensively. It's not defense and offense. It's they're heading there. But the result is so simple and so quick. Michael's side wins. God's side wins. There's no place found in heaven any longer for the dragon and his angels, and they're cast to earth. Rejoice, heaven, woe to earth. Because when he comes down, he has great wrath and a short time. All right? He knows he has a short time. And what does he do as a result of coming to earth? What's the first thing he does?
Persecutes the woman.
Persecutes the woman. What does she do? She flees, right? Okay, she's been given the wings of eagles, and she flees for how long?
1260 days.
This case says time,
Times and half a time.
times, and half a time. Okay, it's another statement about her fleeing. 3.5 years, yes. Just another way of saying it. Time, times, and half a time. From the presence of the serpent. Then it tells specifically the serpent pours water out of his mouth, hoping to flood her, get her swept up in the flood. But the earth, apparently the literal ground, absorbs that water and saves her, and she's able to flee to the place that's described above as a place that God has prepared where she will be nourished for that period of time, 1260 days. That's what's said in verse 6. Now it's saying that she goes to a wilderness where she was nourished for time, times, and half a time from the presence of the serpent. So she's protected by God who created that situation and from the earth who helped her with the flood. So as a result of it not working going after the woman, what does he do now? He goes after
Her
The
children.
rest of the
the
children.
rest of her offspring. And how are they described?
To keep the commandments of God.
And,
Hold
Just
to
as
the
in Jesus.
okay, so it's not just keep the commandments of God, it's also holding to the testimony of Jesus. If I describe somebody that way, what would be your statement about that person?
Christian.
A Christian, a believer, right? Now, nationality is not mentioned, okay? So the rest of her offspring, in this case, are described as believers, okay? What might that indicate about the woman that fled and was protected? They're not talked about as the rest of her offspring. They're her, let's say, primary offspring. Her primary offspring aren't described this way. So how might we what might we say about them? They're the nation of Israel, right?
Jewish.
They're Jewish, but maybe at this point, maybe, not yet believers. But they're still protected by God, okay? And I just want you to hold on to that thought, because a distinction seems to be being made. Or it could be talking about Jews that are being protected and are believers at this point, and the rest of her offspring are the Gentile believers, okay? But it doesn't, Israel is Israel, so that's the reason I'm not so sure I would abide by that statement. Okay, so just we have to think about these things. Who are these people, okay? And in chapter 13, what do we have?
The dragon stands on the seashore.
Right, so we have our character, our personage, the dragon, standing on the seashore, linking these two chapters. Don't separate them too much. We're rolling right into another set of information, but we know who that dragon is. We're absolutely certain. He's standing on the seashore. And what comes out of the sea?
Beast.
Okay, so can you kind of just picture it? He's standing there watching this beast come out of the surf, come out of the water, right?
They're calling him out.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you've got the dragon on seashore, and then you have the beast out of the sea, right? Okay. This beast is described. How is he described?
7 heads.
10 horns, 7 heads. On his head, horns are diadems, and on his heads are blasphemous names. Okay, by that description alone, is this the dragon? How was the dragon described? He was described as 7 heads and 10 horns with 7 diadems. Okay,
Same thing.
is this the same description? No. These are two separate, and sometimes I'm pointing these things out because of some things people will say from past teachings and stuff, and I just want, when God gives us details, so you're giving us details for a reason, so we can make these distinctions.
Wait a minute. Go
Yes.
back to the description of the dragon.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, 7 heads.
7 heads and
Okay,
10 horns.
This is 7 heads.
Yeah,
This is 10 horns.
But
and
on
his
the
horns
dragon's
were
7
10.
heads are diadems, on the beast's 10 horns are diadems.
Oh, okay,
Okay?
gotcha.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to write the numbers down. And why, you read the first description and go, okay, why did he say, if he had said 7 diadems, I would have assumed they were on the 7 heads. But then you come over to the beast and you're going, okay, I've got 10 diadems and 7 heads. That doesn't work, but there's 10 horns. So he specifically said, but on the heads are blasphemous names.
Yeah.
Okay, what makes something blasphemy?
Against God.
Against God, and it's not the truth, right? So if a personage has a name on them that is a blasphemous name, what might that indicate that name is? Or it's against God and it's not the truth, right? It's a lie, and it's blasphemy because it is a lie against God, okay? But what might, if I were saying something blasphemous about myself, what might I be saying? That I am God? Wouldn't that be blasphemous? Because I'm not. And that'd be the worst thing I could say is that I am, right? I'm just saying that might be something. Because there's not going to be it's not going to be blasphemy if it's, I'm a woman,
No.
or he's a man. That's not going to be blasphemy. Or my name is Peggy, or his name is John, that's not going to be blasphemy. So it's blasphemous names, so you have to think about that. He's also described in verse 2 as being what? Like a leopard. It says like, remember. Like a leopard.
His feet were like those of a bear.
Okay, and these are all likes. I'm going to leave the likes out for just
Okay.
ease, but feet like a bear, right? What else?
Mouth like a lion, mouth of a lion.
Okay, the mouth of a lion. What else?
Power.
Power,
Give it power.
Leopard, bear, lion, okay, and it says, and the beast, he is the beast, and then it says the dragon gave him,
His power.
right, dragon gives him
Authority.
power, gives power, authority, and his throne, right?
Mhm.
Okay, now, again, I love stating the obvious or asking the obvious. If he can give a throne, what does that indicate? He has a throne.
Yeah.
Right, he has power to give, he has authority to give, and he has a throne to give.
Well,
Okay.
he's trying to be like God, trying to be like God.
Right, yeah, and some things that we can know through other parts of Scripture, the New Testament, tell us things about him. He is the prince of the power of this world, and the prince of the power of the air. I mean, he has authority, but it's limited. Ultimate authority is from God, but God has allowed this authority, and how did it get to him, and who was it supposed to be in the hands of all along? It's God's ultimately and always, but who did God give it to? The power and dominion over the earth? Man. He gave it to man, right? And what happened?
We messed
Man listened to the dragon and fell in sin, and now that power and authority was handed over for a time to the dragon. So he's had this realm of this earth. Not completely. He's not more powerful than God. It's really a matter of not about God, it's about us versus him and what we have been living as a result of. But also, a one like us, not a him, sorry, a man, came and changed all that. From the first Adam who fell, the last Adam did what? Brought it back, right? And remember John weeping when the book was brought out and no one was found worthy in heaven or earth or under earth to open that book and break its seals, but except the Lamb who purchased us from the earth. And his blood did that. He was worthy to break its seals. So we believe that book or that scroll represents the very thing we're talking about here. Control, dominion, the deed of earth. And Jesus is able to take it out of God's hands and break those seals and bring these events about that we're talking about and take it all back. Right? And the time that he earned that, Jesus is God, he's eternal, but actions happened that proved out that Jesus earned that worthiness by, what did it say? We were purchased how? By his blood. So historic in time was the crucifixion. Again, what looked like our darkest hour. was the best thing that could ever have happened, even as horrible as it was. And even as that prayer I read earlier, describing what he went through so that I could be free, so that I could have joy. He endured the worst of the worst. He didn't just take on sin. He didn't just kind of sort of take care of sin. He became sin in order to die and put it to death, that we can be alive forever. Not he be alive, he is alive forever, but that we get to join him in that. That's just an amazing, amazing thing that's not even really here, but it is. But the dragon gives his power and his authority and his throne to the beast. Whose side is the beast on? The dragon, Satan's, right. Whereas we had the two witnesses that were clearly God's people, now we have this beast that is under the authority and power of the dragon. And then it tells us something very strange about him. It says, it was like one of his heads had been slain, and that fatal wound, it's fatal mean dead, fatal mean it actually killed him, fatal wound was healed, right? So what does that give you a picture of?
A miracle.
Death, and yes, a definite miracle. Death, and he's now alive again.
Resurrection.
Okay? So the beast, one of his heads, had a fatal wound healed. As a result of this fatal wound being healed, how does the earth view him?
Worship.
They worship him. They are amazed by this, right? Who wouldn't be? Well, we shouldn't be, but I'm just saying, it would stun us, but they are amazed, and they followed after the beast. And it says, and they worshipped both the dragon, so the EDs worship the dragon and, sorry, I didn't spell that right, dragon and the beast. We're not talking about just thinking it's great, punching him in the arm and telling him it's a great thing. They worshipped him. This is a big word in Scripture. It's not a mild, following. They followed after him, meaning they went along and did whatever, but they worshiped the dragon and they worshiped the beast. And it said, because the dragon gave his authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like the beast, and who is able to wage war with him? Okay, let's just think for a second. If this beast is this beast, and this beast came from the abyss, could that be what we're talking about here? He was dead, and he came from the abyss, and from coming from the abyss, what does he do? He kills the two that nobody can touch, right? And it looks like nobody can touch him because they could have, if anybody could have, they could have. And as a result, it says, who's like the beast? Who's able to wage war with him? I mean, could you imagine anybody waging war with this leader who has died and come back to life and who's killed the two strongest ones there that were on earth at the time that nobody could touch? If I'm tying that together correctly, because coming out of the abyss indicates coming back from death. Okay? Even though we see this beast coming out of the sea, that's not, the coming out of the sea is not coming out of the abyss. The coming out of the sea means he is alive and walking on the earth. Sea usually indicates people, like a multitude of people, like the whole world's people. There's more water covering the earth than there is land. Okay, so if that's what it's saying, he's coming out of the earth, he's coming out, not out of the earth, he's coming out of the sea. But that's when he's alive, that's when he's on this earth, but then he dies and comes out of the abyss.
So you're saying that the two beasts are the one and the same?
These two beasts, not the two beasts of 13, chapter 13, but the beast of 13 that's coming out of the sea is the beast that kills the two witnesses.
But it's not chronological.
No, it doesn't have to be chronological because this is, yes, it does have to be chronological. Hang on. You remember, as this being described, it's talking about this beast that's on the scene right now, but I got to tell you about it. I got to tell you where he came from. I got to tell you what he's like. This is giving us a description, and then we get to events. Okay, so it's saying what he is and what people react, but there is a point where he has a fatal wound that's healed, and then it says, it was giving him a mouth to speak arrogant words and blasphemies, and authority to act for how long?
42 months.
Okay, he has authority for 42 months. Now, where would he have gotten this authority from? The dragon, right? And ultimately, God is allowing these events to happen. Jesus is bringing them all about, but there are players in here doing what they're doing. And remember, when the dragon was cast down to earth, he only had a short time. And what does he do as a result of that? He empowers the beast. That's what's happening here. And as he empowers the beast, that doesn't mean the beast wasn't already alive. I mean, he's not going to take a baby.
Right.
You've got a man that's on the scene, okay, a man that's in some capacity here, and he gives that there's something that happens to that beast at that point where the dragon empowers him, and he has authority to act for 42 months. So don't forget, time phrase, 42 months. And then it says, it's given to him to wage war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation was given to him. Worldwide dominion. This is why sometimes you hear about, those statements of just a one world authority or one world religion and all of that. Okay. And again, if you hear those things, you wonder if there's any basis for them, and there might be, okay? And then it says, all who dwell on the earth dwellers, worship him, and everyone whose name is not written from the foundation of the world in the book of the life of the Lamb. So here's a description of who the earth dwellers are. Earth dwellers are those whose names are not written in the book of the life of the Lamb. So again, if we're going to put a simple word to it, what would we say these earth dwellers are?
Unbelievers.
Unbelievers. Right. Absolutely. We didn't make that up. They're unbelievers. Their name's not written in the Lamb's book of life who has been slain. And then it says, he who has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is destined to captivity goes. If anyone kills with a sword he must be killed. Here is the perseverance and faith of the saints. Okay? This is something that should keep us grounded. This is something that should keep us glad that we are a saint. Is that we can know that if somebody's destined to captivity, they're going to go. Sovereignty of God. If somebody's kills with a sword, they should be killed. This should keep our faith. This should keep us strong. That's a perseverance of the saint. Then there's another beast. Where does this beast come?
From the earth.
So there's the second beast. He's from the earth. What does he do?
He exercises all the authority that the first beast had.
In his presence. So
In
number
his
one, we
presence.
know it's two beasts. It's not the same.
Right.
Because he's doing it as a sidekick.
Right.
This is the Robin to the Batman, sorry. Okay, so he exercises the authority of the first beast in his presence. Don't forget that. He does certain things. What does he do?
Makes fire come down to the earth.
Makes fire come down from heaven. Pretty powerful stuff, right? He also performs signs, miracles, right, in front of people. He causes people to do what?
To worship the first beast.
Right. He causes everyone to worship the beast.
And causes them to have a mark on their hand.
Later, he causes a mark of the beast, but he also, in the middle, he causes the earth dwellers to do what?
Make an image.
Make an image. Okay, so you have worship of the beast, you have an image of the beast, and they're told to worship the image as well. They're to worship the dragon, the beast, and the image. But the image is of the beast. He causes the image to speak. And what does the image do as a result of speaking? He calls out who doesn't worship. So he causes them to be killed. So the image speaks. So like if you were in its presence and you weren't worshiping, he points you out. The image does. Yeah, whoa. Okay. But he causes all of this, and if you don't take the mark, what are you prevented from? Buying or selling. Okay, and then it talks about the mark. It's either of his number, the beast's number, or his name, and the number is 666. Again, something we did not make up. I just love it when I find the things that maybe I've heard about. Okay, very quickly we're going to go through chapter 14 because we want to put some of this on a timeline. And it says, in chapter 14 we have a group of people mentioned. Who's that?
Angels. Angels.
We have angels, yes. And what else do we have mentioned? A group.
The 144,000.
The 144,000. Where have we seen them before? What chapter? What's happened? 14.
7.
Right, 7 and 14. Remember, 7's perfect number of God, 14's double that, or 144,000. I try to have ways that my mind can remember things. Sorry, I have to erase all of our nice writing that we could refer back to, so we'll just have to go by memory or your notes or mine. Or get a second whiteboard. Okay, so as it describes these 144,000 in chapter 14, where are they?
Elephant.
Standing on Mount Zion.
Okay, they're on Mount Zion. Who are they with?
Lamb.
With the Lamb. Okay, at that point, Mount Zion is sometimes referred to on earth, so we're not sure yet, but it says they're with the Lamb. Where is the Lamb?
On Mount Zion.
Well, it's on Mount Zion. I like your answer. But the Lamb in general has been in heaven, but Jesus is capable of being somewhere else, so we'll just hang on to that for a second. What is it said about what's on their forehead? Yes, his name, the Lamb's name, and the name of his Father is written on their forehead. Now remember in chapter 7, we're told about this group and what's going on there. The earth is not going to be harmed until what? They're sealed on their foreheads. Okay, so this is now telling us the seal on their foreheads is the name of the Lamb and the name of the Father. Okay, so this is that group that was sealed in chapter 7, but in chapter 14, the name is on their forehead. They sing a song that no one else can learn, but it's saying they, in verse 4, have been purchased from among men as first fruits to God and the Lamb. So if they've been purchased and it says they follow the Lamb wherever he goes. So where do they have to be?
Heaven.
In heaven, right. It tells us, sorry, I didn't put 144 up here, 144,000. Tells us a little bit more about them. They're chaste, never defiled themselves with women. In chapter 7, it named all the tribes they were from, so we know the tribes of Israel, so they're Jewish by heritage.
No lies.
They never lie, never been defiled with women, they're chaste. They follow the Lamb wherever he goes, and they've been purchased as first fruits to God and to the Lamb. They're blameless. Okay, so you hopefully have written all that down. And this is, so we see them from chapter 7 on earth to chapter 14 in heaven. Okay? So time has passed, and this is what has happened. So in their time on the earth, if they were blameless, they were God's people, sealed with God's name on their forehead, and Jesus' name on their forehead, and they were on the earth for a time, along with the two witnesses, what might they have been doing? Witnessing. So it wasn't just two voices, those two witnesses, but probably this 144,000 were also witnessing. You hear me say probably, doesn't necessarily say that, I can't imagine they didn't, but okay. Then we move on and it's talking about all these angels, right? Another angel, another angel. So the first angel is what, does what?
Preaches to those who live on earth.
Okay, he's flying in mid-heaven, right?
Yes.
And he preaches an eternal gospel. And part of it, he says, as he's preaching, is fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made the heaven and the earth and the sea and the springs of water. Now, all of these heaven, earth, sea, and springs of water have up to now been impacted through a lot of the seals and things that have happened before now, and the trumpets and all. And then what's the second angel say?
fallen is Babylon.
Okay, so the second one says fallen is Babylon. And a third one, but it talks about Babylon, it gives us some information. She made all the nations drink of the wine of the passion of her immorality. And then a third angel, and what does he do? What is it?
Anybody one worshiping the beast and receives the mark will drink from the wine of the wrath of God.
Okay, if you worship the beast and the image, right? And take the mark, you receive God's wrath, right? But it doesn't just say God's going to be mad at you. What is this wrath described as?
Tormented with fire
How long?
and forever and ever.
Forever. Eternal torment. Okay, is this a light thing? Can you get by with this and this be okay? Does it say if you do this and repent? No. If you worship the beast and you worship the image and you take the mark, you're done for. Okay, so if you want to take a simple message from the book of Revelation to people, simple, even just to say, go and read it for yourself, you might say, listen to who? The two witnesses, and don't do what? Take the mark of the beast. Simple. That's simple. Okay? There's a lot more, because we need to tell them about what's going to happen. But the basic and vital things are, listen to the eternal gospel that's going to be preached. Listen to the two witnesses. Maybe the 144,000 are preaching too. Give glory to God. Look at these events. Any of that. But simply put, listen to the two witnesses. Don't take the mark of the beast. Obviously, don't worship the beast and all of that. Now, practically speaking, if you don't take the mark, you can't buy or sell. So what might happen as a result of not taking the mark? You might starve to death, right? You might freeze to death because it might be winter and you don't have to eat because you can't pay your bills. So, not to mention the whole thing about people, fighting against each other and all of that, and the world getting increasingly worse. Okay, so that's the third angel. Is there another angel? What does he say? Or what does he do?
Comes out of the temple.
Okay, so a fourth angel comes out of the temple and does what?
Put it in a sickle and read.
So he tells somebody something, right? The angel coming out of the temple tells who? What?
Someone like the Son of God sitting on a cloud with
Right.
a sickle.
Okay. Okay, so I just put Son of God, but it says one like the Son of God comes, that has a sickle, and he's told to do what?
Put in the sickle
Put his
and read.
to reap. He's to reap the harvest of the earth, right? Okay, and I want you to just hang on to those thoughts and phrases. He's told to put in his sickle into the earth and reap the harvest from the earth. Then another angel, what happens now?
He comes out of the temple,
A fifth angel comes out of the temple?
and he has
He
a
has a
sharp.
Okay, so this angel has a sickle, right?
Yes.
What does he do? He gathers what?
Clusters from the vine.
Clusters from the vine, right?
Isn't that another angel?
That's the sixth angel.
Is it six?
And the first one, it just says he came out of the temple and he has a sharp sickle. Then he said, then another angel.
Okay, so I'm going to put fifth and sixth. Okay, the fifth one has a sickle, the sixth one tells him what to do, right?
Yes.
Okay, so this other angel tells him what to do, but he tells him to gather the clusters of from the vine, right?
Right.
And then what does he do when he gathers them?
Throws them in the great winepress.
Okay, so they're thrown into the wine press.
Of the wrath of God.
And then the wine press is trodden right?
Yes.
Okay, think about that. Have you ever, remember the scene from Lucille Ball? Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry, we all know that one, right? Where she's stomping the grapes. That's the idea, of stomping the grapes, or have them in a wine press. They're trampled or stomped. What's the goal of trampling the wine press? Or stomping the grapes? Real grapes.
Get the juice.
To get the juice.
Right.
Because they're going to produce what?
Wine.
Wine, ultimately. Something, they could produce a lot of things, but a wine press ultimately is squeezing out the juice to get eventually to the wine, right? That's the goal. So they're thrown into the wine press of the wrath of God, and it's trodden where?
Outside the city.
What city would that be?
Jerusalem.
Most probably Jerusalem. And what's the result?
Blood
Not-
comes out.
Not wine or not grape juice comes out, blood comes out. Okay? So if he's gathering clusters from the vine, are these really grapes? No, they're people. And this is trodden outside the winepress of the wrath of God, is trodden outside the city. Blood comes out, how far and how high?
Up to the horse's bridle.
Up to a horse's bridle for 200 miles. Okay, is this a good thing? No. So this sickle and its harvest is not a good thing. Is this sickle and this harvest the same thing? Number one, they're done by two separate things, two separate personages. Well, this one's done with somebody, one like the Son of God with sickle. He's harvesting, he's reaping. That's a positive thing. Okay? Down here, you've got the clusters of the vine. A lot of times, remember in some of their vows, or even John the Baptist from the womb was never going to touch grapes, was never going to drink wine, never going to drink from the vine. Sometimes the vine represented people, the world, and sin. Sometimes. So you have to kind of think of that. Here, the harvest is, and the sickle would be more like the grains, right? Being cut with that sickle and gathered, and there's a reaping, and that would be a positive thing. These are not the same thing. We're talking about two different crops, for one thing. This one doesn't talk about blood. This doesn't talk about trampling. This doesn't talk about bad. And who's it done by? The Son of God, or one like the Son of God, right? And it doesn't talk about the wrath of God. So one's a positive and one's not at all.
Well, it's interesting too, because the one angel, it says, because the harvest of the earth is ripe. And
Yeah.
the other one is because her grapes are ripe.
Right. It's two different types of product or produce, right? Okay. So very quickly, let's nail down on a timeline some of what we can know. Okay? There's a pivotal point that we saw in these chapters that happens. We've got some time phrases as a result of that pivotal time. When did things shift? What is that pivotal time? Between what and what?
The two witnesses.
Well, those are people. I'm talking about, we're going to put a time on here. What happens, what are something we can mark in time? We've looked throughout Revelation at the progression of events, and we're going to try to put, maybe not everything, but we're going to try to put a lot up here and gather these ideas that we have, or all this stuff, the events and all from chapter 11, and put them in time. But we're just going to mark a line right here.
John measured
There's
the temple.
time. There's 1260 days and John measuring the temple. All of those things we're going to put up here. But I need you to mark that point. What stopped and what started. What ended, what came. The end of what? And then the beginning of the next. What was that point? I want you to tell me, not me tell you.
The two witnesses were killed.
We're talking about the marking of an event. An event. Something is past. Something is coming quickly.
Second one.
Second what was passed, thank you. So at this point, you've got the second woe is past, and what else could we call that wasn't called that? It's the end of what? One of the seals, trumpets, or
Six
bowls.
trumpets.
Sixth trumpet, thank you. So this is the end of the sixth trumpet, is the point, and I'm just gonna put it right before that, okay? So at that point, now the third woe is coming quickly, but it's the beginning of what? Seventh trumpet. So you got the seventh trumpet. This is gonna get a little crazy and a little bit piled up, because a lot of things happen right at that point. Now remember from chapter 10, there's a verse in verse 7, there's a phrase that when the seventh angel is about to sound, what is going to happen?
The mystery of God is.
The mystery of God is finished. If you want to reference it, put 10:7, because that's where you find it. The mystery of God is finished. In chapter 11, when that seventh trumpet sounds, we have a phrase, the kingdom,
The world has become the kingdom of
yes,
our Lord.
so the
Jesus Christ.
kingdom of this world has become the kingdom of our Lord and His Christ, and He has begun to reign. That's in chapter 11, verse 15. Thank you. So, later, if you want to, or if you can do it now, in your Bible, beside 11:15, put 10:7. Go over to 10:7 and put 11:15. Start doing your own cross-referencing. Okay, because these are time phrases, all right? So if the mystery of God is finished and the kingdom of this world has become the kingdom of our Lord and His Christ, and He has become to reign, these are the other things y'all were telling me about. What had just been going on right prior to the end of the second woe? What time period had passed? What had just ended? What were the events? Remember? What's going on in 11? Who is going on in 11?
Well, the two witnesses.
Thank
were-
you. There you go. Okay. So going backwards from here, you have 1,260 days, right? Of the two witnesses. Ending here and going that way. Okay? Now those last few events happened right before this, but the two witnesses have been testifying for 1,260 days, during which they shut up the sky, fire proceeded out of their mouths, they turned water into blood, they killed anybody, that's the fire coming out of their mouths. At this point, what ends that 1,260 days? What event?
Earthquake.
Well, that's what happens as a result of in that hour.
They die.
They die, they're killed by who?
The beast.
Okay, so you've got the beast, at this point, you've got the beast from the abyss, right? Okay, so the beast from the abyss, to say something very obvious, is on the scene prior to this point, correct? Okay. Now, that's the 1,260 days of the two witnesses. We also have the 42 months of the temple being trampled underfoot. Not sure quite yet where to put that. We just know that there's a period of time, right? We have other time phrases that we came up with. Okay, we did 10 was the mystery of God, 11, we've got the two witnesses, and that point in time of the seventh trumpet, sixth trumpet ending, seventh trumpet happening. It's the kingdom of this world, it's the same thing as the mystery of God being finished. It's at the end of the two witnesses. The beast does what the beast does, all of that. The time came for the dead to be judged. The nations were enraged. You could write every bit of this on here, because this time is now the time came for the dead to be judged. Nations were enraged. Time came to give the reward to the saints. That's what's going to happen on this side. Okay? All of that you could write in there. But we got some more events. We have chapter 13, right? We have, 12. We got to go with 12. In 12, we have a lot of history, right? So long before this time of Revelation, you've got the woman giving birth. You've got the dragon wanting to devour. right? Back here, way back here, not even close to your 1260 days probably, back here, in time, in history. So those are part of what's going on, and the child later is caught up to God, right? That's way back in time, but we want to put it on our timeline somewhere. It happened long before these events. But in chapter 12, we also have the woman fleeing into the wilderness for 1260 days. We got the woman fleeing into the wilderness for time, times, and half a time. Okay? When second half part of that chapter, last part of that chapter, she flees into the wilderness because what had happened? What happened to the dragon?
He was sent to there.
He was cast to earth as a result of what?
War.
The war in heaven. Okay, so you have a war in heaven, right? And you can put more detail to it, Michael versus dragon, but as a result, the dragon is cast to the earth. And he's cast to the earth. And from that time forward, how he gives his authority to the beast, and the beast has how long?
42 months.
42 months going this way. Beast has authority for 42 months, starting when the dragon was cast down. It's in the same time period that the woman flees and is protected for 1260 days. And time, same thing, times, and half a time. It's the same period of time because she's fleeing from the presence of the dragon and she's protected. Woman flees for 1260 days, time, times, and half a time. Okay? It all comes at this same point. Whether it's right before the end of the sixth trumpet and the seventh trumpet sounds, or right as the seventh trumpet sounds, all of this is going on at the same time. There's a war in heaven. The devil is cast down. From that point forward, he goes after the woman, and she's protected for 3.5 years. Those two time phrases, 1260 days, time, times, and half time. That's the short time he has. Because of that, he watches the beast is on the scene, but the beast comes up, he gives the beast his authority and his throne and his power for 42 months. During that time, the beast is going to make war with the saints. He's going to speak blasphemous things, and people are going to worship him. But right before this sometime, the beast has had that fatal wound that was healed. Because he had to have come back on the scene from the abyss to kill the two witnesses. So he's on the scene back here. The beast is alive and doing things prior to this point in time. And right up to this point, he has died and come back, killed the two witnesses, and then he really starts his stuff. Because who can touch him? Who can wage war with the beast? Remember the Earth Dweller said that? Mm-hmm. Who can touch him? Who is like him? He had a fatal wound that was healed. It tells us later in that chapter, the fatal wound is from a sword. So if people are watching this event and they see someone who's killed with a sword and comes back to life, they absolutely know that it's the beast, right? So that fatal wound and all comes out back here somewhere.
But we don't know where.
Nope. We just know it's on this side of that. And it's during this 1260 days, and it's prior to the killing of the two witnesses. Okay? You have the second beast and all that he does. So over here, you have the image. You have the mark of the beast. You have all of the authority that he had in the presence of the first beast. Now the beast has its authority. Okay. Could the image and all of that come over here? Possibly, but we know it's over here. We absolutely know that the image and the mark of the beast happen on this side of time. Okay? So that's 12, and that's 13. And in 14, we've got the 144,000 in heaven. So at least we see them up here somewhere in heaven. And you've got those angels and all their statements. I believe the angels' statements are a broad overview of things that are coming. I don't think they necessarily happen that quickly, one right after the other. Because remember, since we've done our study before, the fall of Babylon comes in another chapter. So we're just told the angel is saying, fallen is Babylon, it's coming. The angel is preaching the gospel, don't know how long that lasts, but you have the reaping of the earth in a good harvest. We have the clusters being gathered in a bad harvest, as I'm going to call it. And the winepress of God, the wrath, we're going to be able to put that in time at some point, what happened in chapter 14. So 14 is basically like, stop for a second, and we'll give you, kind of like Genesis 1 gives you an overview, 2 starts going, well, let me tell you what happened on day 6, right? And gives you a broader picture. That's kind of what's happening here in verse 14. And then in 15, we're going to proceed and do more as we come up in this next week. Does this help to start nailing some things down? We're going to do a lot of timelining, and you're going to have from other parts of the Bible lots of this fleshed out and understood even better. It's really, I think, going to be exciting when you see in Scripture elsewhere, when you see about this. Because possibly, it was for me, may not be for you, you've not been taught the right thing about a passage of Scripture that this clearly points to. So you get to find it out for yourself. That's really good. So we'll end, and we'll get our meal, and we will watch the video after.